Alright, hop into the time machine, buckle up and brace yourself, because today we're zapping back to around 1370 AD, to a stone fortress in England, where the wind howls and rats run the show. Sounds epic, right? Knights, banners, the clash of swords, maybe a harp strumming at a romantic feast. But hold up, step off the Hollywood set. You're not a lord, you're definitely not a lady, you're a servant. And this castle? It's less a palace and more a low-budget horror flick. Picture it. Dark corridors, flickering candles, the constant feeling that something's about to jump out at you, and a creepy chill on the back of your neck. No, this isn't a dream. This is your new reality. So here's the question. Could you survive a single day in this castle? Or would you be begging the time machine to take me back the moment you spot your first rat? Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and get ready. The sun's rising, and this castle is ready to swallow you whole. But first, if you're digging this wild ride, drop a comment with where you're at and what time you're reading this. It's always fun to know who's joining this absurd horror show from around the world. Now, dim the lights, let the faint hum of the fan kick in, and let's dive into the stone corridors of this medieval castle. Dawn. Cold, stinky, and an absurd wake-up call. You open your eyes, pitch black, so dark you can't even see your own hand. Where are you? On a straw mattress, naturally, but don't let the word mattress fool you. This is basically a pile of straw with a scratchy wool rag tossed over it. In the modern world, you'd expect a pillow, a comforter, maybe some cozy slippers. Here, dream on. Your blanket's full of holes, letting icy drafts sneak through. The castle's stone walls are freezing, even in summer. And that smell hitting your nose? Oh, that's no perfume. It's a mix of mold, smoke, sewage, and something rotting somewhere. Welcome to the morning in a medieval castle. Your first thought, this has got to be a prank. Where's Netflix? What's the Wi-Fi password? You get up, but watch out. The stone floor is so slick, one wrong step and you're meeting your hip bone up close and personal. You're wearing a linen tunic, but don't let tunic fool you either. It's basically a potato sack. The sleeves are torn, the hems gray with grime. Shoes? Ha! The rich folks get leather sandals, but you're probably barefoot because the Lord thinks shoes for servants are a waste. Your toes are already freezing, and every step on the stone floor makes you wonder, is that the cold or is it a rat? Spoiler, it's usually a rat. Yup, the castle rats are so bold, they're crashing in your bed rent-free. One of them built a nest in your straw mattress last night. Welcome, roommate, you mutter, because what else are you gonna do? Scream? That just amuses the rats. Step outside and the sun's barely peeking over the horizon. But inside the castle, it's still a dark, gloomy world. The corridors are lit by torches, but they're so weak the shadows dance on the walls. And that howling sound. Is it the wind or the castle's ghost stories? In the Middle Ages, superstition is everywhere. The servants whisper about a tale. 100 years ago, a servant accidentally poured vinegar into the Lord's wine. And now her ghost roams the halls, moaning, "Forgive me, my lord?" Absurd, you bet. But in the dark, every creak makes you jump. And yeah, those creaks are real. The castle's old, stones are cracking, rats are scurrying. But your mind's stuck on, is that a ghost or just a rat? Last week, a servant swore she saw a shadow in the corridor. "It's gotta be a ghost," she said. Turns out it was the cook's shadow, but that doesn't even calm you down. Because the cook? He's scarier than any ghost. Your first task is to light the fire in the kitchen. In the modern world, that's as easy as flipping a switch. Here, it's a nightmare. First, you've got to haul wood, and it's so heavy your arms are shaking. Then you're scraping flint to spark a flame. Your fingers are numb, the smoke's burning your throat, and if you don't get that fire going, the head cook's ready to pluck you like a chicken. The head cook is one of the castle's most terrifying figures. Huge, red-faced, always yelling. "Light the fire, you stupid girl," he roars. That's you, by the way, stupid girl. And no, this isn't a pep talk. It's the medieval version of a performance review. One wrong move and you're either getting a slap or kicked out of the castle. Kicked out? Sounds like freedom, but outside, it's just begging or hanging with bandits in the woods. Bandits? They're better dressed than you at least. They've got stolen boots. Morning, dirt, sweat, and dancing with rats. You got the firelit, congrats. But don't relax because your to-do list is so long. If it was written on parchment, it'd stretch from the castle gate to the village square. The castle's the Lord's home, sure, but it's also an administrative hub, a garrison, and sometimes a prison. Your job? Keep this massive stone pile running smoothly. First stop, the kitchen. It's a haze of smoke, grease, and pure chaos. The cook's barking orders: knead the bread dough, slaughter the chickens, clean the hearth. The wooden counters are so filthy a modern health inspector would scream and bolt. The knives are rusty, the pots are sticky, and in one corner there's a bucket full of something, probably animal guts, or worse. Last week a servant accidentally stuck her hand in that bucket. "What is this?" she yelped. The cook snapped, "Don't ask, just stir." Later that stuff turned into the Lord's special sausage. Dark humor, because what else are you gonna do? Puke? That's an option, but if the cook catches you, you might end up as the next sausage. Breakfast prep is straight out of a horror movie. For the Lord and his family, it's fresh bread, cheese, maybe some honey and wine. But your share? A rock-hard chunk of bread and a sip of watered-down ale. In the Middle Ages, drinking water is like playing Russian roulette. Even the castle fountains often reek of sewage. Ale at least kills the germs, but the taste? Imagine sipping warm, sour grain soup. And then there's the flies. In the Middle Ages, flies are your most loyal pals. They buzz around while you eat, and you're swatting at them with your tunic. But it's no use. They win. Once, a servant was chasing a fly and knocked over the Lord's wine goblet. Result? A night in the dungeon. Yup, in the Middle Ages, there's no such thing as a small mistake. The fly's fault? Nope, you're the one to blame. Because flies, they're more untouchable than the Lord himself. After breakfast, it's cleaning time. The castle floor is stone, but that doesn't mean it's clean. There's dust, food scraps, rat droppings, and every now and then gifts from the Lord's hunting dogs. Broom? Sure, there's one, but it's just a bunch of twigs tied together. Your knees ache, your back's hunched, but you can't stop. If the Lord's wife or guests show up, the floor better be spotless. Otherwise, you're branded a lazy servant, and in the Middle Ages, laziness doesn't just get you scolded. It could mean a whipping, getting kicked out, or, well, nobody likes to talk about the or. But rumor has it, one servant was so lazy, they chained her to the castle wall for a week as an example. Dark humor? Nah, that's just medieval reality. Every sweep of the broom has you praying, please not the chains. And speaking of rats, they're not just pests, they're practically a parallel civilization in the castle. Kitchen, bedroom, even the Lord's dining table. Once, a servant accidentally dropped a rat tail into the Lord's plate. Result? She was declared Satan's minion and threatened with burning at the village square. Absurd, right? But in the Middle Ages, Satan is everywhere. Burnt bread, Satan, spilled goblet, Satan, rat on the plate. Definitely Satan. You're constantly praying, "Dear God, keep Satan away from me," because nobody's got your back. Last month, a servant was chasing a rat and accidentally knocked over the Lord's crown. The crown landed in a rat nest. When she tried to grab it, the rats threw her a coronation ceremony. Sounds like a joke, but it's true. Now, the rats supposedly wear the crown and dance every night. You laugh, but deep down, you're terrified. What if they make me fetch the crown? Noon, the Lord's shadow in an absurd theater. By noon, the castle quiets down a bit. The Lord and his family are feasting in the dining hall, while you're in the kitchen, scraping up leftovers. But this isn't a break, just a shift in duties. Now it's time to clean the Lord's chambers. Up you go, climbing the stone stairs. Every step slippery, because workplace safety isn't a thing in the Middle Ages. Fall, in best case, you sprain something. Worst case, nobody finds you for hours. On the stairs, a fellow servant whispers, "Watch out, the Lord's wife is in a mood. She saw a wrinkle in the mirror this morning, and now she's yelling at everyone." Great. As if rats and dungeons weren't enough, now you're dealing with a lady's midlife crisis. The lady looked in the mirror and screamed, "This wrinkle's the devil's work." You're thinking, "No ma'am, that's just aging." But you keep your mouth shut because you don't want to be accused of witchcraft. The Lord's chamber is the fanciest spot in the castle. Wooden bed, feather-stuffed mattress, maybe even silk curtains. But your job is to keep it pristine. You're changing the sheets, but you better be careful. If the lady spots a single stain, you're toast. Once, a servant left a tiny smudge on the sheets and got accused of witchcraft. Yup, witchcraft. In the Middle Ages, anything can be witchcraft. A stain? Witchcraft. Wrong dish? Witchcraft. The Lord's horse acting up? You're definitely a witch. You want to scream, I'm just a servant, but who's gonna listen? The Lord's wife? She cares about you as much as she cares about a rat. Last week, a servant accidentally spilled a drop of wine on the lady's dress. The lady screamed, "This is the devil's doing," and the servant got a week in the dungeon. Wine stain or Satan? In the Middle Ages, the answer's always Satan. Meanwhile, the castle's buzzing with rumors. Servants are whispering stories. A prisoner chained in the dungeon, a ghost wandering the halls at night, even talk of the Lord having a secret enemy. True or false? Nobody knows, but in the Middle Ages, superstition rules. One servant says, "I saw a shadow in the corridor last night." Another chimes in, "That's gotta be the ghost. 100 years ago, a servant poisoned the Lord's wine, and now her spirit haunts the castle." You laugh it off, but deep down, you're wondering, what if it's true? And yeah, those shadows are real. The castle's old, stones creak, the wind howls. But your mind's stuck on, is that a ghost or just the cook's shadow? Last month, a servant swore she saw a ghost. Turned out it was one of the Lord's knights, drunk and stumbling into the wrong corridor. But that doesn't reassure you, because a drunk knight, that's scarier than any ghost. Afternoon, dungeon, rats, and dark humor. In the afternoon, things get even more absurd. Your task? Head down to the dungeon to bring food to the prisoners. Yup, the dungeon. Cold, dark, damp. The stairs are narrow, the stones mossy, and the air is so thick it's hard to breathe. You're carrying a tray with stale bread and a bowl of oatmeal gruel. Your torch flickers, shadows dancing on the walls. Down below, you hear chains rattling and moans. The prisoners could be thieves, rebels, or just someone the Lord doesn't like. You don't know who they are, but the desperation in their eyes chills you. One whispers, "Save me." What do you do? "Sorry, I'm just a delivery service," you say. Dark humor, because what else can you do? Join them in the dungeon? Last week, a prisoner didn't like the food and threw the tray at the wall. You're thinking, "Buddy, this ain't a Michelin star restaurant. Gruel or starvation, your call." As you descend into the dungeon, a rat scurries over your foot. You want to scream, but you can't. If you drop the tray, the head cook will have your hide. Rats are your most loyal enemies in the castle. Kitchen, bedroom, dungeon, they're everywhere. Once, a servant was chasing a rat in the dungeon and accidentally spilled a prisoner's food. The prisoner yelled, "I'd rather have the rat." Absurd, right? But in the dungeon, rats are king. You hear their tails rustling in the dark, and it traps you in a horror movie scene. Think about it. In the modern world, you see a rat, you jump on a chair and scream. Here? "Welcome, new roommate," you say, and keep going. Last month, a servant started talking to a rat in the dungeon. "What's your name, little buddy?" she said. Turns out it wasn't a rat, it was her own shadow. Mental health in the Middle Ages? Kind of a loose concept. When you finally climb out of the dungeon, you breathe a sigh of relief, but there's no relaxing. Now it's time to tend to the Lord's hunting dogs. Out in the castle courtyard, the dogs are chained up, howling. You bring them meat scraps, but watch out. Those hungry hounds are snarling, and one wrong move could make you their dinner. As you feed them, you spot the knights practicing swordplay in the distance. The clang of steel, shouts, laughter. From the outside, the castle looks strong and orderly, but inside, it's chaos. And you? You're at the bottom of this chaotic heap. A knight glances at you and laughs. "Hey, servant, joining the dogs?" You bow your head because answering back counts as disrespect. But in your head, you're thinking, at least the dogs are honest, not stuck up like you. In the Middle Ages, humor's for the lords. Your job? Don't laugh, be the punchline. Evening, feast, tears, and an absurd circus. Come evening, the castle comes alive. The Lord's throwing a feast. Maybe it's a victory celebration. Maybe he's hosting a neighboring lord. In the great hall, long tables are set, candles are burning, and a bard strumming a harp. But you're not invited. Your job is to hustle. You're filling wine goblets, carrying plates, cleaning up spilled food. The Lord's guests are laughing their heads off while you're invisible. But make one mistake. Like spilling wine on the lady's dress? Suddenly, you're the star of the show, and not in a good way. Once, a servant accidentally sloshed soup onto the Lord's plate. The Lord roared, "This is an assassination attempt," and the servant got thrown in the dungeon. Absurd? Yup. But in the Middle Ages, logic is a bit flexible. You're praying with every goblet you pour, "Please let the devil clean up any stains." During the feast, the kitchen's another horror movie scene. The cook's yelling orders, "Turn the pig, stir the sauce, stoke the fire." The pig's sizzling on the spit, but the smell's off, because hygiene's a foreign concept here. The knives are rusty, the counters are sticky, and in one corner there's a bucket full of animal guts. Modern kitchen? Think stainless steel, sterile surfaces. Here, blood, sweat, and chaos. A servant once asked, "What's gonna happen to these guts?" The cook barked, "Don't ask, just stir." Later, those guts turned into the Lord's special sausage. Dark humor, because what else are you gonna do? Throw up? That's an option, but if the cook sees you, you might be the next sausage. Last week, a servant accidentally knocked over the gut bucket. The cook screamed, "This is the devil's work." The servant said, "No, just clumsiness." But it didn't matter. The dungeon was waiting. When the feast wraps up, it's cleanup time. You're scrubbing tables, sweeping up spilled wine and food scraps. Your hands are calloused, your back's screaming. But there's no stopping, because tomorrow morning, it all starts over. Meanwhile, the castle's going quiet. Candles are snuffed out, corridors plunge into darkness. In the silence of the night, you hear the wind howling and the occasional weird creak. The ghost stories start feeling a little too real. One servant says, "I saw a shadow in my room last night." Another adds, "That's gotta be the ghost. The Lord's old wife died in the dungeon, and now she haunts the castle." You laugh it off, but deep down, you're thinking, what if it's true? Last month, a servant swore she saw a ghost. Turned out it was one of the Lord's knights, drunk and stumbling into the wrong corridor. But that doesn't comfort you, because a drunk knight, scarier than any ghost. Night, darkness, cold, and an absurd prayer. Finally, you drag yourself back to your bed, that straw mattress, but before you sleep, you say a prayer. In the Middle Ages, religion's in every moment. You thank God you're still alive, but you also pray to make it through the night, because the castle's not a safe place. Thieves, fires, even the Lord's sudden rage could come knocking. And of course, those ghost stories. Servants whisper about one tale. 100 years ago, a servant accidentally poured vinegar into the Lord's wine, and now her ghost wanders the castle. But there's an even wilder rumor. Another servant dropped the Lord's crown into a rat nest, and now the rats wear it and dance every night. You laugh, but in the dark, every rustle spooks you. And yeah, those rustles are real. A rat scurries across your mattress. "Welcome, Your Majesty," you mutter, dark humor, because what else can you do? As you lie there, the straw mattress itches, the cold stone floor makes your bones ache. The blanket you pull over you is riddled with holes. Somewhere, a rat's rustling. You try to sleep, but your mind's still in the dungeon, the kitchen, the great hall. The medieval castle might sound like a dream, but for you, it's a nightmare. And this nightmare repeats every day. But the most absurd part? Despite all this chaos, there's a bond among the servants. You whisper and giggle, mimicking the Lord's ridiculous antics, and somehow you survive this horror movie set. Last week, a servant mocked the Lord's hat, saying, "Look, I'm the Lord." Everyone cracked up, but when the cook overheard, he bellowed, "The devil's possessed you." You're thinking, no, we're just having a laugh. But in the Middle Ages, fun's a dangerous luxury. Disease, death, and the peak of dark humor. Being a servant in a medieval castle isn't just about rats in the Lord's temper. There's also disease. In the modern world, you pop a pill and the flu's gone. Here, one cough and everyone's yelling, "Plague!" Medieval doctors are more like wizards. Last week, a servant ran a fever and got sent to the doctor. What did he do? Handed her a jar of leeches and said, "Put these on your chest, it'll drive the devil out." Result? She's still coughing, but now she's got leech marks all over. Absurd? You bet. That's medieval medicine. Another servant had a toothache. The doctor said, "Let's pull it." But there's no anesthesia, just a pair of pliers and a glass of wine. She downed the wine and screamed, "For God's sake, you're pulling my soul, not my tooth." Dark humor, because what else you gonna do? Cry? That's an option, but tears won't clean the stone floors. And then there's death. In the Middle Ages, death's always lurking. Last month, a servant fell into a cauldron of boiling water in the kitchen. Nobody helped her. They thought it was God's punishment. Another was forgotten in the dungeon and starved. You pray every day because surviving's a miracle. But the most absurd part? Death's a spectacle. When a servant dies, the village priest shows up, preaching, "The devil took her," and everyone shouts, "Amen." You're thinking, it wasn't the devil, it was that cauldron. But you don't say it out loud because the priest might call you a devil next. Last month, a servant was banished from the village on plague suspicions. Turns out it was just allergies. But in the Middle Ages, there's no such thing as allergies. Just the devil. Beyond the castle, the village, superstitions, and absurd chaos. The castle's a horror movie set, but the village outside is just as wild. In the afternoon, the Lord orders you to the village to gather supplies. The village is right outside the castle gate, but it feels like another planet. Muddy paths, kids covered in grime, and a stench that's everywhere. The villagers see you and whisper, "The castle servant, dancing with the devil, huh?" Yup, in the Middle Ages, the castle's both feared and fascinating. You're thinking, dancing with the devil? I wish that'd at least be fun. But you smile and keep going, because the villagers are steeped in superstition. Last week, one accused a servant of being a witch because she accidentally spooked his chicken. The chicken stopped laying eggs. Result? The servant faced a witch trial in the village square. The test? They threw her in the river. If she floats, she's innocent. If she drowns, she's a witch. Absurd? You bet. But in the Middle Ages, logic's a luxury. When you reach the village market, you're gathering supplies. But watch out, thieves are everywhere. Last week, a servant tried to steal a loaf of bread at the market. She got caught and they chopped off her hand. You're checking your pockets every step because you're shopping with the Lord's money. If it goes missing, you're the one in trouble. A villager looks at you and asks, "How's the castle rats doing?" You grin, "Living like kings." The villager shouts, "Servants of Satan." You're thinking, yeah, but at least they've got crowns. Dark humor, because life in the village is a nightmare too. Rats are like a bridge between the castle and the village. Everywhere, all the time, in every condition. The secret world of servants, solidarity, and absurd rebellion. The castle's a horror movie set, but there's a bond among the servants. At night, you whisper and giggle on your straw mattresses. You mimic the Lord's ridiculous antics. Last week, the Lord got a new hat, so big it gets stuck in doorways. One servant put a basket on her head and strutted down the corridor, saying, "Look, I'm the Lord." Everyone cracked up, but when the cook overheard, he roared, "The devil's got you." You're thinking, no, we're just having fun. But in the Middle Ages, fun's a risky luxury. There's also a secret rebellion among the servants. Not a full-on revolution, mind you, just little things, like slipping vinegar into the Lord's wine or smudging the lady's dress on purpose. Last month, a servant accidentally dumped salt into the Lord's wine goblet. The Lord screamed, "Poison!" The servant said, "No, just salt." But it didn't matter. The dungeon was waiting. Every time you pour wine, you're tempted to think, maybe a pinch of salt? Absurd, right? But these tiny rebellions keep you going, because in a medieval castle, laughter's a miracle. The Lord's absurd habits, a theatrical spectacle. The Lord's one of the castle's most absurd characters, a rich, powerful, but totally bizarre. Last week he bought a magical ring. Rumor has it, it'll make him immortal. You're thinking, yeah, but it won't save you from a rat bite. The Lord puts on the ring, stares in the mirror, and shouts, "I'm a god." You're cleaning his room, witnessing this scene. You want to laugh, but you can't. The Lord's temper's like a volcano. Last month, a servant accidentally touched the ring. The Lord bellowed, "This is a sacred relic," and the servant went hungry for a week. Every time you see the ring, you're wondering, sacred relic or just shiny trash? Another of the Lord's habits is giving heroic speeches to his knights every morning. "We are the kingdom's protectors," he roars. But everyone knows his biggest victory was hunting a rabbit last year. The knights listen to his speeches, smirking behind his back. In the kitchen, you whisper, "Protector of the kingdom? Can't even protect us from rats." Dark humor, because the Lord's lofty world clashes with your reality. You're dealing with rats, disease, and dungeons while he's dreaming of heroism. Absurd, but that's the Middle Ages. Could you survive? So, be honest, could you hack it as a servant in this castle for even one day? Maybe, but just maybe. Used to modern comforts, you'd probably scream at the first rat. Your knees would shake in the dungeon, and one glare from the Lord, you'd be begging the time machine for a rescue. From the outside, the medieval castle looks grand, stone walls, banners, knights. But inside, especially for a servant like you, it's a horror movie. Cold, dark, filthy, and always one step from disaster. But the most absurd part? These people lived this life. No complaints, or at least none loud enough to be heard. For them, this was normal. They prayed, worked, laughed, cried, and somehow they kept going in this chaotic mess. So, what do you think? Would you dare to be a servant in this castle for a day? Or would you just say, thanks, I'll stick with the modern world? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm curious, and don't forget, our next adventure might zap us to another time, another horror movie, so keep your eyes peeled. The medieval castle might forget you, but you'll never forget this day. And the rats? They're still dancing with that crown.